All right, so we talk about alternative cryptocurrencies. So it is now a good time to talk about one of the best alternative cryptocurrencies, Ethereum. So as you can see, it started 4 years later than Bitcoin. So that 4 year of experience actually allowed us to learn a lot about blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies. So Ethereum actually introduced new things. So Ethereum is the technology powering the cryptocurrency Ether, ETH. And for this actually the university ETH Zurich is really angry because now they cannot find themselves when they Google ETH because it was shortened for ETH Zurich. But anyway, so it is powering the cryptocurrency Ether and thousands of decentralized applications, dApps. Since January 2018, Ethereum is the second largest cryptocurrency in terms of market capitalization behind Bitcoin. The Ethereum blockchain is a distributed public ledger where transactions are mined into blocks by miners who solve cryptographic proof of work challenges. As you can see, this sentence is no longer correct. But again, I deliberately did not erase my previous sentences because when I was teaching this course last year, it was proof of work, but it is not now. So in the following slides, we will talk about them. So in order not to erase history, I keep old slides to show that how things have progressed, okay? Otherwise, I mean, Ethereum since the beginning talk about moving on to proof of stake. So almost everybody since 2015 thought that Ethereum was proof of stake. So once I convinced everybody that it is proof of work, now it moved on to proof of stake. So now I have to convince them again that it is proof of stake, okay? So in this ecosystem, an account is entity represented by an address that is capable of submitting transactions, but this is what we use private and public keys for. So there are two types of accounts in Ethereum. Externally owned accounts, which are controlled by anyone holding the corresponding private key, and contract accounts, which contain executable pieces of code called smart contracts. So this is actually the main difference between Bitcoin and Ethereum. So in Bitcoin, when we create a transaction, it is always, most of the time, transferring money from some inputs to some output accounts, right? Here we can actually put a programming piece of code and everybody can go back to that smart contract and run it. So it is as if you are putting a function in terms of programming inside the blockchain. So these have many advantages, but also these have many disadvantages. For instance, in the Bitcoin, if we spend some money in the older blocks, we don't need to keep that in the memory. But if you write a smart contract on the Ethereum blockchain, that smart contract has to be kept in the memory because in any moment somebody can call that function. So this actually increases the load on the full nodes. So actually in the future updates, Ethereum actually planning to keep old unused smart contracts in a larger hard drive, but keep the newest version on an SSD drive so that they can manage all of this load, okay? A smart contract is a program run by Ethereum virtual machine, which leverages the blockchain to store its persistent state. A transaction is the transfer of funds between accounts or an invocation of a contract's public method. Okay. So smart contracts, we mentioned this before. These are software programs that automatically execute the terms of an agreement between two transacting parties without the need for a company or other intermediary to intervene and ensure that the two parties fulfill the terms of their agreement. So we have seen this in actually NFTs. So two people transfer the ownership of an NFT without needing actually a third party. But of course, instead of writing our smart contracts, when we use the smart contract of the marketplaces, we actually do it by a third party. But in that scenario, you trust the third party, right, which is the NFT marketplace. The contract executes itself without anyone overseeing it. No one has to enforce this transaction. Smart contracts are often used to execute contracts and agreements efficiently across blockchains such as Ethereum. So let's move on some of the things that are important. A lot of people say that when we write something on the blockchain, we cannot change it, right? But actually we can if everybody wants to change. This is the point. So this is what some people overseas, okay? So here's a very nice example. Ethereum Classic hard fork. So in 2016, a decentralized autonomous organization called the DAO, a set of smart contracts developed on the platform, raised a record $150 million in a crowd sale to fund the project. So actually very nice thing to, crowdfund the project by this. A smart contract is really fantastic for this kind of operations. The DAO was exploited in June 2016 when $50 million of the tokens were stolen by an unknown hacker. So here, actually in the smart contract, the problem occurs when you verify the signature. So here, if there is a problem in the smart contract, the transaction occurs before the verification of the ownership. So there was that kind of error here. So somebody transferred the funds to an account, but the thing is that there was a time lock. So the hacker wouldn't be able to spend it in 30 days. So they have to wait 30 days. So at this point, people said that maybe we should reverse this transaction, right? So the event sparked a debate in the crypto community about whether Ethereum should perform a contentious hard fork to reappropriate the affected funds. So, I mean, you might say that this is the right thing to do because, somebody is stealing money and we know it. But in the other end, people argued about this because the whole reason we were using blockchain was to, not to allow things to be changed, right? So if you start changing things like this, in the future, maybe they may also reverse your transaction, even if it is a, normal, non-evil transaction, okay? So they said that this is against the idea of blockchain. So for instance, if this kind of things, when this kind of things happen in Bitcoin, I mean, not smart contract money laundering, but if somebody sends money to an account with the wrong number, so they lose the money, actually we can also create a hard fork there. But since there is no central authority, you cannot convince everybody to make this change. But in Ethereum, we have the Ethereum Foundation, so they say that it would be better if you make this, reverse this transaction so that people will have more confidence in Ethereum. So at the end, this resulted in the network splitting into two blockchains. So the Ethereum with the theft reversed, Ethereum Classic, which contained on the original chain. So on the original chain, now it is called Ethereum Classic, the money is, again, this $50 million worth tokens were stolen by the hacker, and actually they didn't spend it. They didn't use any mixing services to hide their steps. Okay, so we still don't know who the hacker is, but maybe when I'm talking, maybe somebody already transferred it. Maybe we should check the current status, but until recently, we still didn't know who the hacker was, so they didn't use the mixing service at that time. After the hard fork, Ethereum subsequently forked twice in the fourth quarter of 2016 to deal with other attacks. Okay, so you have to. This is why at the beginning, when I talk about blockchains, I try not to use the word tamper-proof. I said tamper-evident. Here it is tamper-evident because they reverse this order, so I can see it on the blockchain. Okay. Ethereum mining. So let's talk about a little bit about the past because there is no longer mining. But let's see how things happened in the past. There was a Byzantium hard fork in late 2017, which reduced the rewards from 5 Ethereum to 3 Ethereum. So with an update, the miners' rewards are reduced. So this was because people thought that there wouldn't be much Ethereums in the circulation, but this was due to a calculation error, and they realized that a lot of cryptocurrency are in circulation. So they said that maybe we should reduce the rewards. So this kind of effects actually, this kind of events affects the prices. Not that instant, but after some time. After the Constantinople hard fork, they generally use city names for this kind of Ethereum updates. Miners receive 2 Ethereum instead of 3. But still, as you can see, there are no upper bounds. We keep receiving these 2 Ethereum. Okay. So mining reward before the proof of stake was 2 Ethereums, but there were also uncle rewards. So in Bitcoin, if 2 miners solve the puzzle at the same time, this causes a conflict, and we wait which one of these new blockchains will be longer. So the longer will be accepted, and we will call the other one orphaned. So that miner will not receive any reward. But since in Ethereum the block addition time is short, like 12 seconds or between 12 and 20 at that time, there were many orphan blocks. So actually Ethereum wanted to give rewards to them so that encourage miners to keep doing. So there were uncle rewards. So even if you're, instead of calling that block an orphan block, they called uncle block. And if that uncle block may be further block, so this rewards actually goes further. You know? So you create a conflict, but at the same time add more blocks to it. So the orphaned one still gets many Ethereums. Of course, this information has to be written on the, you know, the conflicting but original blockchain. Yes, uncle inclusion incentive is to, for instance, you created the block, somebody created an uncle block. So in the next block, if you include the uncle block to your current blockchain, then you also have an incentive. So this is why miners also keep the conflicting blocks in the memory and try to add them to the blockchain. So at that time, block addition time was variable. Since this is a proof of work, you know, it generally takes around 12 seconds, but this ever change depending on the usage. In the proof of stake, we will limit this to 12. So this is what I'm talking about. Since the London upgrade on 5th August 2021, transaction fees are not rewarded to miners, they are burned instead. This is the reduced amount of Ethereum in the circulation, okay? So after this upgrade, actually miners didn't start receiving transaction fees, they kept this 2 Ethereum instead. So as you can see, I'm talking about many upgrades here, right? So Ethereum actually produces a lot of upgrades because there is a kind of a central authority, Ethereum Foundation. So they add new properties and make changes. But of course, if you don't want to follow these changes, you can create a hard fork and keep the original one, like in the case of Ethereum Classic. So let me talk a little bit more about this mining stuff, but since it is no longer valid, I will briefly read the slides. Ethereum's mining algorithm, ETH, is a modified version of the Dagger-Hashimoto algorithm. ETH is memory hard, which means that it uses a lot of memory, and was thought to make the algorithm ASIC resistant, but ASIC ETH mining is possible for years. ETH is based on choosing subsets of a fixed resource called DAG, directed acyclic graph, which is updated every 30,000 blocks, which takes around 5 days. So there exists a seed which can be computed for each block. From the seed, a 16 megabyte pseudo-random cache is computed. Then initially 1 gigabyte dataset DAG is generated from the cache, but this size kept increasing after all of these steps. So it exceeded 4 gigabytes at some point. So mining involves grabbing random slices of the dataset and hashing them together. This is why we call it memory intensive, because you have to keep this in the memory and take random slices from the dataset. Verification can be done with low memory by using the cache. DAG size increases linearly over time. Currently, when I say currently, it was around 8th of June 2022. It was around 5 gigabytes. This is important because when this number exceeded 4 gigabytes, GPUs with 4 gigabyte memory stop mining because they don't have enough memory to store this DAG. So I think it happened around January, either 2021 or 2022. So that also affects the Ethereum price because a lot of miners can no longer mine, and also ASICs that have memory around 4 gigabytes stop functioning too. Okay, so this was a huge problem at the time because, as you can see, this increases linearly, but when you buy a GPU, it stays there for years. For instance, if you have a GPU with 8 gigabytes of memory, so this DEC size will at some point will exceed 8 gigabytes, so your GPU will not be able to mine again. Same thing for ASIC. So this is why moving on to proof of stake was kind of a must for Ethereum. So many GPUs and ASICs stopped mining Ethereum after DEC size exceeded 4 gigabytes. Many GPUs will no longer mine Ethereum once DEC size exceeds 6 or 8 gigabytes because there are GPUs with this amount of memory. However, this may never happen because the Ethereum is planning to switch to proof of stake since its release in 2015. This is why there is a misconception that Ethereum was always proof of stake. Many upgrades led the way to this transition, and it is recently announced that Ethereum may be proof of stake at the end of summer 2022, but we are now in 2023, and we really know that at the end of this summer they moved on to proof of stake. So this slides in the past actually was telling the truth. So after this transition, Ethereum ASICs will be useless, right? Because we are moving on to proof of stake. So people, but since you buy the device, that device can only mine Ethereum, and there is no other cryptocurrency that has this mining problem, right? Mining puzzle. So people said that, okay, let's make a hard fork. Let's do not move on to proof of stake. Let's keep the proof of work version of the Ethereum and keep mining with our ASIC. So it is possible that a hard fork may create Ethereum Classic 2. This is what I wrote at that time, but actually this really happened. They didn't call it Ethereum Classic 2. I just named it myself here. But there are two, as far as I know, there are two projects which keeps Ethereum in the proof of work and ASIC still work there. So you can mine there. But as far as I know, it didn't. Yeah, here is my update for the proof of stake. At least two hard forks allowed ASIC mining to continue, but they did not receive much attention. So I don't know if the exchange marketplaces allow you to exchange this kind of cryptocurrencies. Moreover, when you create an Ethereum hard fork, all of the NFTs in the Ethereum also appears in the other hard fork, right? So this was what we argued in the first place. If you create such a hard fork, there will be two copies of every NFT. So marketplaces said that they are not going to recognize NFTs from these new blockchains. Okay. So, and this is really the case right now. Okay. So let's move on to the Ethereum merge. So this is how the proof of stake happened. So this was their announcement at that time. So they were going to merge this consensus layer and execution layer. At that time, it was called ETH1 and ETH2. So we currently no longer use these words. We simply say Ethereum merge happened. So the result is the new Ethereum. So Ethereum 2.0 was used to refer to proof of stake consensus layer of Ethereum. Since the upgrade is expected to happen between August and October 2022, the term Ethereum merge is used instead of Ethereum 2.0. So you can find all web pages where they call Ethereum 2.0. This is why I didn't erase these sentences. This merge is supposed to solve some of Ethereum's biggest issues like high transaction costs and the network's ability to scale. Under the current proof of work model, Ethereum issues roughly 13,500 ETH per day and annual issues of about 4% of the total ETH supply. So this also, affects the Ethereum prices because you are introducing a lot of Ethereum. However, the proof of stake issuance model is determined based on how much ETH is actively being staked on the network. The merge was executed on September 15, 2022. This completed Ethereum's transition to proof of stake consensus, officially deprecating proof of work and reducing energy consumption by 99.95%. Right? So it is no longer consumes a lot of electricity, as a lot of people, against this kind of electricity consumption. Ethereum is now not using that much electricity. But the thing is that as of today, I cannot find any white paper that explains Ethereum proof of stake completely. So we know that it works, but if there are any proofs we haven't seen it yet. So I couldn't find any white paper that explains everything. Okay, so for this reason, I will try to use this link from Ethereum's developers documents to explain how the proof of stake works. So these sentences are all from that blog post actually. But again, there's no, as far as I know, white paper that explains all of the steps. So let us see how this proof of stake works and what are the new terms like validators and so on. So now Ethereum uses proof of stake where validators explicitly stake capital in the form of ETH into a smart contract on Ethereum. This staked Ethereum then acts as collateral that can be destroyed if the validator behaves dishonestly or lazily. The validator is then responsible for checking that new blocks propagated over the network are valid and occasionally creating and propagating new blocks themselves. To participate as a validator, a user must deposit 32 Ethereum, or multiples of it, into the deposit contract and run 3 separate pieces of software: an execution client, a consensus client, and a validator client. So for a miner, you only need a client in the past. Now you need 3 clients. This is what we are telling here. So validators. Validators verifies the transactions and the block signature and then send a vote called an attestation in favor of that block across the network. Time in proof of stake Ethereum is divided into 12-second slots, not variable as in the case of proof of work. So currently, all of the blocks were trying to be written in 12 seconds, okay? And these slots actually create epochs, 32 slots. One validator is randomly selected to be a block proposer in every slot. This validator is responsible for creating a new block and sending it out to other nodes on the network. Also, in every slot, a committee of validators is randomly chosen, whose votes are used to determine the validity of the block being processed. So you might say that why I'm staking my Ethereum. Actually, I think you earn like around 4% Ethereum if you stake, if you become a validator. So with these definitions, let's see how a transaction gets executed in Ethereum proof of stake. So a user creates and signs a transaction with their private key, right? So this is how a transaction starts. The user defines the amount of gas that they are prepared to pay as a tip to a validator to encourage them to include the transaction in a block. The tip gets paid to the validator while the base fee gets burned. The transaction is submitted to an Ethereum execution client, which verifies its validity. This means ensuring that the sender has enough Ethereum to fulfill the transaction and they have signed it with the correct key. If the transaction is valid, the execution client adds it to its local mempool list of pending transactions and also broadcasts it to other nodes over the execution layer gossip network. When other nodes hear about the transaction, they add it to their local mempool too. One of the nodes on the network is the block proposer for the current slot, having previously been selected pseudo-randomly using the random or function, let's say. So this node is responsible for building and broadcasting the next block to be added to the Ethereum blockchain and updating the global state. The node is made up of 3 parts, as I mentioned: an execution client, a consensus client, and a validator client. The execution client bundles transactions from the local mempool into an execution payload and executes them locally to generate a state change. This information then passed to consensus client, where the execution payload is wrapped as a part of a beacon block that also contains information about rewards, penalties, slashings, attestations, etc., that enable the network to agree on the sequence of blocks at the head of the chain. Okay. So these are the execution and consensus clients. Other nodes receive the new beacon block on the consensus layer gossip network. They pass it to their execution client, where the transactions are re-executed locally to ensure the proposed state change is valid. The validator client then attests that the block is valid and is the logical next block in their view of the chain, meaning it builds on the chain with the greatest weight of the attestations as defined in the fork choice rules. The block is added to the block local database in each node that attests to it. the transaction can be considered finalized. In other words, that it cannot be reverted if it has become part of the chain with a supermajority link between two checkpoints. So checkpoints occur at start of each epoch, and to have a supermajority link, they must both be attested to by 66% of the total stake ETH on the network. So this is actually how a transaction passes, and you say that it is finalized by seeing that more than 66% of the stake ETH on the network actually agrees that this is really written. So let's talk a little bit more about finality. A transaction has finality in distributed networks when it's part of a block that can't change without a significant amount of ETH getting burned. On proof of stake Ethereum, this is managed using checkpoint blocks. The first block in each epoch is a checkpoint. Validators vote for pairs of checkpoints that it considers to be valid. If a pair of checkpoints attracts votes representing at least 2/3 of the total stake ETH, the checkpoints are upgraded. The more recent of the two targets becomes justified. The earlier of the two is already justified because it was the target in the previous epoch. Now it is upgraded to finalized. To revert a finalized block, an attacker will commit to losing at least 1/3 of the total supply of stake ETH. So this is explained years ago. So if you're more interested about how this can be done or why this is true, please go and read this blog post from 2016. Since finality requires a 2/3 majority, an attacker could prevent the network from reaching finality by voting with 1/3 of the total stake. There is a mechanism to defend against this, the inactivity leak. This activates whenever the chain fails to finalize for more than 4 epochs. The inactivity leak bleeds away the stake ETH from validators voting against the majority, allowing the majority to regain a 2/3 majority and finalize the chain. So if you behave dishonestly for a long time, actually you are penalized, so you lose your money.